Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wu Jialing from Sociology Department, and it's my great honor to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Professor Rima Apple. Professor Apple is the Virus Life Cycle Professor Emerita at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She's a leading global scholar in the field of women's history and the history of medicine and nursing. Professor Apple has authored 8 influential books and has been recognized with numerous awards for her academic contributions. Her works including Mothers and Medicine, A Social History of Infant Feeding, 1890s to 1950, Vitanemia, Vitamin in American Culture, and Perfect Motherhood, Science and Child Rearing in America, have left a lasting impact on both students and scholars, myself included. We are truly fortunate to have Professor Apple with us today, and she will be sharing insight from her latest research on delayed motherhood. Her presentation will last about 1 hour, followed by an open discussion. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Rima Apple.
Thank you. Thank you. Gina Davis, actor, gave birth to twins at the age of 48. Halle Berry, at 41, gave birth to her first child, a daughter, and at 47, her son was born. Janet Jackson became a first-time mom at 50. Laura Linney had her first child at 49. Hilary Swank gave birth to twins at age 48. In the past several years, stories about celebrity women birthing in advanced ages have flooded the popular media. These articles have focused increasing attention on the question of delayed motherhood, particularly with assisted reproductive technology available in the late 20th and 21st centuries. But late or delayed motherhood is not a new phenomenon. Accounts about celebrity new mothers and women who choose to freeze their eggs or embryos, who undergo IVF procedures, have only drawn attention to a much older issue. In the mid-20th century, a woman was considered an older mother if she waited until her 30s to birth her first child. I don't expect you to be able to read all the numbers. What's important is the slope. In the 21st century, women birthing their first child in their 40s is no longer exceptional. By 2019, the median age of first births in the United States was over 30, as birth rates for those between 35 and 39 increased by 67%, and for women between 40 and 44, over 132%. Reports from Taiwan, Norway, and the United Kingdom show that these figures are not unique to the United States. For over a century, medical practitioners, social commentators, and demographers have dated the legal, economic, social, and cultural reasons underlying the advanced maternal age of populations. And women postponing pregnancy have spoken out, often defending or justifying their decision. Through my research, though my research centers on situations in the United States, this presentation demonstrates that the United States is not unique. Even in the 19th century, some women, particularly early feminists, publicly advocated voluntary motherhood. Leaders such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, herself the mother of 7, promoted a form of natural birth control which she considered the gospel of fewer children and a healthy, happy maternity. Stanton and other supporters focused on social good, that a family with fewer children would result in better familial activity, economic and social conditions, and happier and healthier mothers and children. Though delayed motherhood was not an explicit goal, they did encourage later marriages. But these early birth controllers were an exception. More typical was EFG, who wrote in the popular magazine Good Housekeeping in 1910 that God commanded that a woman should birth no fewer than 4 children. This demand earned reader support, except for one reader, an old subscriber who saw the situation differently. She announced, "I have been married for 7 years and have deliberately avoided having children. Perhaps we shall have children within the next half-dozen years. But by that time, I shall be better. We shall be better able to afford help, and my husband won't be worried to death how to make ends meet and keep his wife, his cheerful, constant companion." An old subscriber echoed the claims of voluntary motherhood. Waiting to start her family would enhance economic stability and would lessen financial and emotional strain on women in child-rearing and on the family, and in turn, society. Many letters to Good Housekeeping scorned the sentiments of an old subscriber. They insisted that the denial of motherhood would result in a lonely old age, that if a woman waited too long, she and her husband would have no desire for children, that life is a struggle, but a home is not a home without children. One male physician opined, "The married woman who fails to bear children falls short of the requirements of life, as much as an apple tree that fails to produce apples or the soil that fails to produce vegetation." Rather grim look. And yet another reader detailed various medical reasons for having children and having them early. This is a long quotation. "There is an age limit for childbearing, and a woman's chances for life are lessened after the age of 30. Also, statistics say that children before that age are healthier, other things being equal, than those of later years. 2 things worth considering. And as to health, what could be more conducive to it than to live in daily contact with a mite of humanity that keeps us alert and happy every moment?" See, that's the cheery part. Laura E. Richards, a well-known author and mother of 7, declared that her anger melts into compassion for the woman who so deliberately stultifies her being. She reminded an old subscriber that a child needs the best that a mother can give, her youth. Richards also drew on the fear of race suicide, concept probably quite familiar to the white middle-class readers of this magazine. Quote, "While she," the old subscriber, "and I fear many other intelligent and educated women postpone or refuse motherhood, nature still goes on her relentless way. The ignorant, the feeble, the vicious bring forth their young at nature's call and add their thousands yearly to the ranks of the defective and criminal population." Almost sounds like Trump. "Where people of culture and refinement add their tens to the little army of seekers after righteousness." These letters celebrate motherhood as the critical defining characteristic of womanhood in the early 20th century, as it has been for ages. This paper studies women like an old subscriber who consciously shook off cultural imperatives and purposefully postponed child rearing. It teases out the reasons they made and make this choice, as well as the financial, medical, social, and cultural environments that influenced their decisions. A medical perspective provides the backdrop for discussions of delayed motherhood in professional and popular literature. Variously labeled elderly prima para, delayed motherhood, older mother, or geriatric pregnancy, these terms presumed complications during pregnancy and birthing for women over a certain age, thereby medicalizing the situation. But older mother as a medical or as a social term is not and was not a fixed category. The earliest mention in the US medical literature is in 1912 and defined the problematic age range as 30 to 45, considering 45 the outer limit. In 1929, a physician at the American Medical Association meeting noted, "There's no unanimity on what constitutes the upper limit of youth." And she determined that women should not fear childbirth even after the age of 30. By 1978, the U.S. National Institutes of Health, at a conference on the use of amniocentesis to test the fetus for Down syndrome, labeled those 35 and older as elderly. By the 21st century, some pushed the ceiling to 45 or even older. Despite this imprecision, there are two constants from the medical perspective. First, with modern health care, healthy older mothers could have safe pregnancies and births. And second, the older mother required medical supervision. These guidelines are evident in the mid-century. Typical was Alan F. Guttmacher's counsel in the 1962 edition and many later editions of his popular Pregnancy and Birth. After warning, somewhat grudgingly, that older women might have problems, he reassured the patient. In all the studies on elderly premaparas, the maternal and fetal risks are slightly higher than in the average group. But the increase is so insignificant that no woman is justified in being deterred from motherhood by it. Any woman, even though she is 35 or over, when undertaking her first pregnancy, can confidently anticipate a very happy outcome if she receives the proper type of obstetrical care. Guttmacher, in his role as an authority figure, dismissed any fears a woman might have if she turns to the doctor in this time of insignificant risk. And William G. Birch, in his pregnancy book, which was widely distributed through doctors' offices, explained that the woman who delayed childbirth may have to work a little harder at exercise, but in the end, the result will be the same as if she had had her baby 10 or 15 years earlier. Physicians did not ignore potential medical problems, but their advice to any woman planning pregnancy, regardless of age, was to follow the direction of your doctor. Mrs. Arthur G. Corning was one of the few mid-century older mothers who recorded her successful childbearing experience at the age of 48. She went to the doctor when she was gaining weight and had missed several menstrual periods. When her pregnancy was confirmed, she would read everything she could, reporting, "Some of the texts sounded a trifle fearsome and probably should have scared me to death. But I have faith in my obstetrician, who watched my progress carefully and seemed content." She faced no complications during labor, though how simple it was to the obstetrician and how much of his skill was required, she didn't know because she was unconscious during the delivery. 4 hours after she arrived at the hospital, she held her son. Delayed childbearing made her a better parent, she explained. It encouraged my husband and me to read that in measuring persons as parents, mental, social age, emotional maturity, and balance count for more than calendar age. Though an old subscriber voluntarily postponed her maternity, and Corning realized involuntarily to delayed motherhood, their views on the situation are strikingly similar, except for one significant difference: Corning's dependence on her obstetrician. Possibly an older subscriber did not see her situation as warranting medical attention. More likely, medicalization of U.S. culture was only slowly growing through the first half of the 20th century. Both women stressed the importance of mother's health. An old subscriber feared she was not healthy enough and preferred to wait. Corning was delighted that her health enabled her to experience a comfortable pregnancy, rapid delivery, and thankfully recounted, "My good physical health, which made the baby possible in the first place, is now my greatest aid. I already find my life more active and more strenuous than I expected." I imagine at 48, running after a child is strenuous. Both considered financial stability crucial. Both stressed the importance of personal maturity. Most interesting was the steady focus on the child or the child-to-be. When the focus was on the mother or the mother-to-be, it was for the benefit of the child. Motherhood was the primary role for women. It was for the benefit of the child, and it was the only role for the woman. By mid-century, articles in women's magazines and home health care books assured older women that as long as they were healthy and under the care of a doctor, they could expect a successful pregnancy and delivery. With titles such as Baby at 40 and Should You Have a Child After 35, articles told women, on the one hand, of potential problems, and on the other hand, the benefits of older parenting, such as maturity and financial stability. The authors would explain to older first-time mothers that there were earlier financial problems. Others married late. Most are business and professional women. Writers always ended with the calming statement on the importance of a healthy mother under medical supervision. The 2000-year edition of William Burke's pregnancy book highlighted continuities and changes from the mid-century. With the excellent medical care available, most women, regardless of their age, need not fear a difficult pregnancy or birth. However, it is now recognized that women under 18, and especially over 35, should plan more than the usual care and observation before, during, and after their pregnancy to reduce the risks to themselves and their babies. More than usual care and observation may include amniocentesis and/or other tests, especially for older mothers. Age was not important, except that it alerted the doctor to take more care in handling the patient and more tests. Lay writers also reassured women that despite all possible complications of pregnancy and delivery, which an older mother faces, her baby has just as much chance of a good life and good start in life as a baby born to a much younger woman. Slight break, please. Again, it's not the numbers, it's the slope. The birth rate of U.S. mothers was dropping throughout the 19th and first half of the 20th century. In the 1850s, women bore an average of 6 children, the last born when the mother was about 36. By the 1930s, the rate was 2.3 children. And by mid-century, women ended their childbearing by the age of 25. The post-war era, the baby boom generation, saw a reversal of this trend to a rate of 3.2. As historian Joni Vanderburg Davis and others have found, bearing children represented the ultimate fulfillment in post-war culture, and women in the United States far outrivaled their 19th century grandmothers when it came to fertility. However, women born of that baby boom and their later sisters made different decisions. In 1970, 1 in every 100 first births was to women 35 and over. In 2005, it was 1 out of 12 first births, and a similar increase for those 40 to 45 began in the early 1980s and has continued to grow. Older motherhood became so common that humorist Nora Ephron lamented, "Just once in my life, I would like to be doing something everyone else is not doing. It seems not to be my destiny. Instead, I struggle with alternatives, make a solitary choice, and at that moment, thousands of other women who are 37 do too." You can giggle. This pattern is being repeated globally in countries with vastly different cultural, social, and economic situations. In the 21st century, the average of first births has reached 30 and beyond in many countries. For example, the latest census in Iran shows that the highest increase in age-specific fertility has occurred in a group of urban women aged 35 to 39. These women made their decisions about motherhood in light of changing social, cultural, and technological factors. The development of the birth control pill, first approved as a contraception in the 19th century, in the US in 1960, and the IUD, modern devices created in the 1960s and 1970s, along with legalized abortion, gave women relatively effective means of controlling their fertility for the first time. Real-time ultrasound, amniocentesis, and fetal monitoring provided healthcare practitioners with tools to address potential fatal conditions. Second-wave feminism fostered new opportunities. Women stayed in school longer. One of the most dramatic developments in the latter part of the 20th century has been the increased enrollment and graduation of women from institutions of higher education. 8 times more women graduated from college in 2017 than in 1940. 26 times more women received master's degrees in 2017 than in 1950. 150 times more women received doctorates in 2017 than in 1950. Globally, 54% of students awarded degrees in higher education were women. The most highly developed countries weigh heavily in this statistic, but the number is also influenced by other nations such as Jordan, where in 2024, over 1/2 university students are female. Greater education also related to health and to later marriage. This higher education and shifting economic climate drew women to pursue careers and professions. Moreover, since the probability of pregnancy is related to an increase in intercourse, it is assumed that married women have a greater opportunity for childbearing. One study noted that not only were older first-time mothers generally better educated than younger mothers, but they were also likely to have higher incomes. Women who stayed in school longer tended to have higher occupational and professional aspirations. The time they spent in their education, in the workforce, enable them to attain financial security. Consequently, the age of marriage was pushed up, especially for women and men who sought personal growth and maturity before marriage and before parenting. For many women, marriage or partnership appears to be a requirement for starting a family. By the present century, two-income families had become common, and for many a necessity, with women remaining in the workforce. Statistical studies of education level and the like show correlation, but we need to hear the voices of women themselves to understand their decisions. A good example is an exchange of letters in the New York Times in 1989. Kim D. Floten's outlook seemed to echo the sentiments of earlier writers in Good Housekeeping. Floten, 27-year-old woman married 3 years, boldly asserted that, "I want children and I want them now." She ridiculed a 36-year-old colleague who, we are told, giddily announced her first pregnancy. And she mocked late 30s women haunted by amniocentesis and the tick-tick of biological certainty. Though proud of the feminists who preceded her, she rejected the idea that submission to our husband's paychecks inevitably await early pregnancy, but rather she aimed to take their hard-earned advances and expand them as I see fit. Floten had read about fertility problems that appear later in life. She'd observed exhausted older mothers racing after their toddlers. This was not the light for her. Floten claimed, "I can fuse my family and work life more successfully than the women before me. And I believe it is my birthright to follow a more biologically sound reproductive schedule." 2 points stand out in this diatribe. First, Floten considered her age, 27, young. 70 or even 30 years earlier, she would have been categorized as older. Second, her self-image was not limited to motherhood. Floten expected and embraced the idea that as a woman, her life is mothering and more. "20th century support for delaying motherhood. Floten's letter did not stand unanswered. June Bingham supported Floten's outlook, however, without her arrogance. She saw another benefit. Her younger motherhood led to younger grandmotherhood, during which she found the vim for toddler house guests and the energy to dance at her grandchild's wedding. Other letters were harsher. One reminded Floten that many women face a barrage of men 28 to 40 who can't seem to commit to more than 3 dates in a row, much less marriage and family. For women in this position, she was grateful that the women's movement had made it acceptable for a woman to be devoted to her career along with or instead of a family. Another rebuked Floten for her smug attitude. Floten was married in her mid-20s, and this reader knew many women in their mid to late 30s who had not yet met their husbands or were going through a painful divorce. Nancy Kopstein-Kaplan chastised Floten for flaunting her self-satisfied decision not to postpone child rearing. She reported, "The women I know who are waiting are doing so for excellent reasons. They have no partner, or the financial sacrifice would be too great. Some of them don't want children right now. They don't care how fast their biological clock may be ticking. Clearly upset with Floden's attitude, Kaplan reminded readers that no one has ever criticized me for wanting to become a mother. I return the favor by not criticizing those who don't. Marion Hunt, a 40-year-old mother with a toddler, reassuringly informed readers that age may make motherhood better in ways youth can never imagine. This change, I'm sorry. This change reflects both continuity with the early 20th century and changing conditions. An old subscriber purposely delayed any pregnancies because she was worried about her health and her finances. She hinted that the wait would help her mature and she would be a better parent. At mid-century, Corning saw the benefits of delaying after she had had a child. She was healthy. She and her husband were not concerned about money. She had the patience and maturity to be a better parent than she would have been earlier. By 1989, finances and maturity remain crucial factors in the decision to delay child rearing. Correspondents didn't mention health concerns, but the lack of an appropriate partner loomed large. I'm sorry, I seem to have missed something, so we'll just go back here. Women reported influences that were determined by personal circumstances and shaped by altered social, cultural environments in the last third of the 20th century and the early 21st century. For the ease of analysis, these four intertwined rationales shall be labeled as finances, educational and professional aspirations, maturity, and independence. Financial considerations persisted as a major feature in the deciding timing of a pregnancy. Staying in the labor force has definite advantages, especially at the upper levels of the economic scale, where a woman could almost double her earnings by delaying her motherhood for a decade. Many women were explicit on this point. One couple had an extremely specific goal. We were very bad at saving money, so we decided to buy this house, borrow some of the down payment, and then force ourselves to work hard to pay it off as quickly as possible. We made the last payment in December. I took out my IUD, and in 2 weeks, I was pregnant. This in itself is a miracle. Many women linked their careers in finances. With a career, they were able to better afford childcare, and they were more likely to have savings and paid off mortgages. Finances are entangled with education and professional goals. The increasing numbers of highly educated women often prepared for professions and careers that could take years to build. Leaving these positions for childbearing results not only in a loss of their current salary, a significant decline in their family income, but the possibility of difficulties in reconstructing themselves in their careers when they come back. Given the persistent scorn of pregnant women in the workforce, women would opt to stay longer in order to better their position. Elaine Koster did just that. She was the senior vice president of the New American Library and had been with the company for 10 years. After giving birth, she took a 6-month leave. When she returned, she insisted that much of her job could be done from home. She went to the office 2 mornings and 2 afternoons a week. Another mother, a judge, had her son at age 31 and explained, "I have always been career-oriented, and before I had a child, I wanted to be sure I could afford a housekeeper to help with child rearing and cleaning so I could continue my work. I have always wanted to work and have always been aware of the role women have played in the development and economy of this country." 20th century studies demonstrate that not just highly professional, highly educated women delayed motherhood for the pursuit of financial stability. Ebony McFadden, 28, grew up in rural Missouri and studied to be a medical technician. She insisted, "I cannot have a child and not have to feel bad about it. I feel powerful that I can make that decision with my own body. I don't have to have a kid to be successful or to be a woman." In the early years of the 20th century, womanhood was equated with motherhood. In the late 20th century, women often included motherhood in a more expansive image of themselves. Maturity, a third factor. This meant more than age. Delayed childbearers located maturity in two domains. One, in their personal lives, self-actualization, you might say, and the second in regard to their offsprings, the best interests of the child. Many felt they needed to grow up before embarking on parenting. As one mother explained, "The pleasure of having your first child at the age of 40 is immense. My enthusiasm for getting pregnant was due to a feeling of readiness, mentally as well as physically." Another explained that in the early years of their marriage, she and her husband knew we wanted a baby. They weren't ready for the trial of parenting and decided to wait because we're still growing up. Still others linked particular life accomplishments with maturity. One felt prepared for motherhood at 33 because "I feel content, satisfied with my career achievements, travel experience, and relationship. I was ready to have a child." For many, maturity represented a confidence that life experiences gave them, remarking they now had the patience that motherhood required. One mother who had her child at 46 believed that her waiting prepared her to be a better mother. She explained, "I feel I have a lot more to offer, a lot more patience, a lot of insights and feelings about how to live and get along and do things on your own when things aren't working out so well, or when the world isn't such a wonderful place." One woman reported, "Waiting until our 30s for us was the only way to go. Had not an unusually convenient time to have a child arisen when it did, which was a break between teaching jobs, I probably would have waited longer." Another married for 17 years before she tried to have a child because the first 2 years of our marriage, I was in graduate school, then I started teaching, but my job situation wasn't stable, so the decision to have kids was put off. We bought our first home and lived there for 10 years. 3 years ago, we bought a different home and fixed it up and then thought, well, we're running out of time. If we want a baby, we should have one now. We're settled, we've done some traveling, we've had our time together, and economically, we're certainly able to give him a lot more than we could have when we were younger. In their minds, maturity gave them a sense of self-satisfaction and the confidence of child rearing. Women who delayed childbearing often stress another aspect: independence. The freedom to challenge social norms or societal pressures that compelled motherhood. Some embraced the liberty that enabled them to avoid the experiences of their mothers and grandmothers, which they saw as lives of drudgery and unhappiness. Veronica was born when her mother was 15. Though she looked forward to a large family, she consciously sought to avoid her mother's circumstances. I knew I always wanted to have children, having lots of cousins and all that, but I didn't want to do it the way I'd seen my mothers do it and my mom do it. I wanted to wait until I was more established and able to fully care for a child. I did go to college. I was able to support myself. I know I've always wanted children. I was waiting for the opportunity. Victoria became a mother after having established herself as a lawyer at the age of 39. For still others, independence meant the freedom to select the timing of their pregnancies, to avoid single motherhood because they didn't want to raise the child alone. Not having a child until I was 40 was certainly not a decision not to marry and have children. God knows I wanted both from early on, but it was a decision not to marry someone if there wasn't a good relationship there. I knew I wanted a husband to share parenthood with. For some women reluctant to embark on single motherhood, egg freezing presents an opportunity to delay motherhood while seeking the right partner. Anthropologist Marcia Inhorn found that, quote, overwhelmingly the women who froze their eggs electively were in their 30s and motivated by partnership problems. Whether explicitly or implicitly connecting their actions to second-wave feminism, these women's assertions of independence demonstrate the influence of the changing cultural model for women's lives. Since fertility declines with age, some observers were concerned that women who pushed the age of childbearing later would be doomed to childlessness. This was not a new word. Decades earlier, Guttmacher had issued a similar, though slightly less alarming message, accepting that a relatively elderly woman does satisfactorily. He insisted that the best ally of successful childbirth is youth. This phrase should be emblazoned on the walls of high schools and girls' colleges. It is a message which the medical profession must constantly reiterate to the women of America. Now, he learned this from experience. He learned this from a 38-year-old patient married 12 years. She was able to become pregnant quickly, but on examination, he found that she had a large fibroid tumor, which required the removal of her uterus, leaving her childless. She sobbed, "Why didn't somebody tell me you should have children while you're young?" Later articles warned women were not sufficiently knowledgeable about age-related infertility and other problems. By the late 20th century, while touting the spectacular advances of artificial reproduction, or artificial reproductive technology, ART, observers cautioned that such stories gave women a false sense of certainty and that sensationalized announcements about successful childbirth of older women masked the problems inherent in this situation. Over the last half-century, developments in artificial reproductive technology, such as in vitro fertilization and the freezing of human eggs, have offered a variety of generally very expensive resources for women who look to delay pregnancy. Study after study documented that the women who tested the limits of older age pregnancy were typically women to postpone parenthood. Women choosing ART must face the possibility that the procedure, which is expensive financially, physically, and emotionally, may not result in the desired effect. In 2020, only about 37% of ART cycles in the United States resulted in a successful pregnancy and birth. In one of the few studies addressing the success of using frozen eggs, the chance of a live birth was 39%. One 41-year-old woman underwent IVF treatments for a year in order to become pregnant. The experience was frustrating. Yet, if someone had warned me about this when I was 30, it wouldn't have mattered, she said. Another woman, 37, was clear about why she opted to delay childbearing. My mother is a feminist professor who struggled to finish a PhD and find a job while negotiating the demands of 3 small children. I learned from her example that motherhood would be best put off until I, also following an academic path, had finished graduate school, gotten a job, and perhaps even attained the security of tenure. Now she is tenured and on sabbatical, and she's ready for childbearing and is deeply involved in IVF. And still, she says, so do I regret this path? Do I blame my infertility on my desire to divorce destiny from biology, to nurture a career rather than a child? Not for a minute. For these women and many of their sisters, womanhood no longer was restricted to motherhood. They defined their lives themselves, and those definitions sometimes included children and sometimes did not. These women could accept the potential failure of ART. So Guttmacher is an example of observers who were sympathetic, troubled that a woman's delayed childbearing could result in depressing childlessness. But the criticisms of others, such as EFG, could be viewed as antagonistic to women. Carly Rivers, a journalism professor at Boston U, believed that the condemnation of childbearing, delayed childbearing, is anti-feminist. Sort of sounds like Trump again. Concluding that the subliminal message is, don't get too educated, don't get too successful, or too ambitious. Sociologist Katrina Schiffel sees the increase in older motherhood exacerbating social and economic class distinctions. Since older motherhood was more common among highly educated, professional, and career women, and since there is a definite economic advantage to working longer and bearing children later, she predicted that older motherhood might perpetuate the inequality we already see in children born of women with and without a college degree. A century ago, in the era of Teddy Roosevelt and alarms over race suicide, Richards feared that if intelligent and educated women delayed or renounced motherhood, the child would be swamped by the children of the ignorant, the feeble, and the vicious. Emphasis on the characteristics of education, profession, and money. The title of one recent article was, "Older Mothers Are an Elite Club," hints at a later day version of this race suicide. These hypotheses require much additional research. The debate over delayed motherhood has not abated, as contemporary journal articles reassured women that the decline in fertility over the course of women's 30s have been oversold. But most significant, recent statistics suggest that the trend toward older first-time mothers has not slowed. Okay? I'm an historian. I'm not a seer. But these figures are one indication of the ongoing acceptance of older motherhood. In addition, factors that are correlated with delayed motherhood, the increasing numbers of women attending higher education and attaining advanced degrees, the evolving strategies to include greater numbers of women in the professions, women's careers and personal goals, the economic need for women to stay in the workforce longer, developments in medical science, especially in the areas of fertility studies and prenatal and neonatal research, difficulty in finding a mate with whom to raise a child, the next waves of feminism. These are even more evident today. Women will continue to make their maternal decisions within social and cultural conditions of today's evolving society, as definitions of womanhood continue to expand beyond motherhood. Thank you. I apologize for my throat. I seem to be losing my voice.
Thank you very much, Professor Apple, for your very inspiring presentation, and it's highly related with the heated debates in Taiwan. So I guess that there will be a lot of questions from the floor, from the audience. So any questions?
You think about that while I get a pencil.
Okay. You want to take questions one by one? Or
Yeah,
you want
I
to
think that
collect
would be
some
easier.
questions?
In less